Hi, everybody. I'm in Seattle with Alex Cruz.
Yes.
Cruz?
Cruz.
Cruz.
Yep.
Kruse.
Yep.
And later you guys are going to see how cool Alex dresses. She does the whole steampunk thing, and that's going to be my new thing. So,
I will train you in the ways of
train me.
steampunk.
I want to be your student. The Magnificent Seven. Okay, so this is how I got the role for Magnificent Seven. My agent called me and said I had just finished working on Murder One, and for Stephen Bochco, and I was anxious for, the next role, whatever that was going to be. And I heard that my agent called and said that MGM was doing a remake of The Magnificent Seven, and they're going to make a TV show about it, and Michael Biehn was going to most likely be in the show. And I was like, I love Michael Biehn.
Yeah.
From The Terminator, Michael Biehn,
Of course.
Kyle Reese. And I went in and auditioned, and there was about 12 people in the audition room. And John Watson, our producer, was there, and Penn Densham was there. And I did 2 scenes from the pilot, and John, with this beautiful British accent that I cannot duplicate. I'll try. He said, that was quite lovely, He says, can you ride a horse? And I said, yeah, I could ride a horse. I could not ride a horse. I think I had been on a horse maybe one time.
You lied.
I
Oh,
lied.
shame.
Sorry, John, I lied. But it was it was one of those jobs where you just had to get this job, So anyway, things worked out in my favor, and I remember John Watson called me on my cell phone, and he said, Rick, this is John Watson. I'm like, oh my God. He says, are you doing okay? I said, yeah. He says, well, I'd like to have you on board. And to this day, I still cannot believe that happened, because normally there's a process that you go through. Like, you have to audition 5 or 6 different times, and go to the network and go to the studio and audition for them. And John just wanted me in the show, and he offered me the job. So that hasn't happened since then. That was 14 years ago almost. So I now realize how rare that is, and how awesome that is. And so thank you, John.
The arcs that were still open, like with Ella Gaines and Vin's bounty on his head, like
Right.
was there talk of any resolution for that stuff, or?
That's a great question.
No. You're not in the loop on that.
I love Ella Gaines. I love that whole story.
Yeah.
What we were all hoping for was, a pickup for the next year, so that we can, start going more into the different stories that were happening. And for me, for example, I really wanted to see more. We touched on it briefly when Rain came into town one day, and then all of a sudden, I think Ezra said, "Isn't that your little paramour from the village?"
Yep.
And I'm just like, and she came to see about me.
Yeah.
Like, do you want me? And I was like, yeah, that's how we need to keep. We need to keep bringing up these sub stories. I really wanted to see more with Nathan and Rain, and that one episode touched upon it in a very good way. But I wanted to see more, and I wanted him to maybe go ride by himself into her village and hang out with her for a while, and her family. But anyway, it didn't happen.
Let's see. There was a question about Nathan's character development, like how involved you were personally in his character development, and
Right.
then the relationship that Nathan had with Ezra, which was kind of a rocky thing going on. But
That crazy fool.
yeah.
How involved I was? in
Yeah.
terms
'Cause, well, we had heard that Tony was actually pretty involved with Ezra's character creation.
of Tony.
So we weren't sure if all of you got to kind of play more of a bigger part in that, or.
I think so. I mean, Tony. What I discovered really quickly was that Tony wasn't really happy with anything that the writers wrote. So he was always rewriting almost every time that every chance he got.
Really?
I now know that's not a bad thing at all. You want to be as proactive as you can.
Yeah.
And as professional as you can in terms of making suggestions about, maybe we should try it maybe this way and that way, without stepping on anyone's toes. And I was so green at that time. That was my first series regular role, and I wasn't sure if it was okay to challenge the networks and the producers or not.
Yeah.
So years later, now I do know now that it's totally acceptable, and you can do it in a way that doesn't make you the problem on set.
Yeah.
And Tony made some really awesome suggestions about how Ezra and Nathan could have more conflict, and I think it worked really well.
It did.
Because like we were just at each other's throats sometimes, and other times you were like,
those are some of the most powerful scenes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And particularly Nathan being an ex-slave, and Ezra being a Southern white man, made it electric.
Yeah.
So I have to applaud. John Watson and Penn Densham for deciding that one of the 7 would be an African American character.
Yeah.
Because it could have easily have not been, and I think that made it more interesting and more truthful, I think, to the time period.
Yeah.
And I did practice, like when I got the job. By the way, I practiced 2 things: mounting and dismounting the horse.
That is important. I ride horses.
Oh, you do? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was really nervous. I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I'm not a horse rider." She says, "Honey, look, it's not about riding horses.
Yeah.
It's about acting." And she said, "I think one thing you should focus on is getting on that horse and getting off the horse.
Yeah.
Because if there's some real horse riding folks out there, they'll know that you don't know what the hell you're doing."
Yep. Exactly.
So I practiced that.
Yeah. Well, you guys all look like you knew what you were
doing. Okay, good.
So you're okay. You're good.
We passed.
We passed.
Excellent.
Yes. And then the knife throwing thing?
Okay, what I did was I set up a cardboard box in my house, and I got some knives, some butter knives, whatever knife I can get. I had a pocket knife.
I got butter knives around the room.
Butter knives. My girlfriend was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I just got a job. Just leave me alone."
Don't question me.
Don't question me. I'm going to be paying rent for the next year for both of us. And I even got a couple of screwdrivers and just practice different weights and things. And I wanted to get really proficient at hitting the mark. And when we shot the pilot, I remember when it was time for me to hit that mark, man, and I was about 20 feet away from just a small mark beside an actor's head. And they gave me a rubber knife, but it was pretty heavy. So if you got hit with it, it would hurt. I hit it the first time. I hit the mark on the first throw. And the director was like, "Cut! Great! Print it! Let's move on. We don't have to do this again." So it's all about safety. And I want to...
Can you still do that?
I think I could. I would have to practice for a little while. But I've always been into, like, I'm a kid, and I'm still a kid, I think, and I like to throw stuff and sticks. You know what I mean? Like ninja swords or whatever, ninja stars and stuff like that. And I think that that kid instinct in me really helped a lot with playing Nathan, or just a cowboy.
Yeah.
Just riding and shooting and
having
roping
fun.
And having fun.
That was another part of the... You guys look like you were just having fun while you
just
were
having
doing
fun,
stuff.
man. And I think that, like you said, you mentioned chemistry.
Yeah.
And what was so cool was, like, I was just telling you that the first person that I knew that Michael was probably going to be in the show, which I was so excited about, but I didn't know who else was going to be in the show. And the first person, when I went in to get, when we got cast, they gave us all horse riding lessons. And I drove up to the ranch outside of LA, and the very first person that I met of the 7 was Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
And Ron is like sitting up on his horse, and he turns. It's like a classic movie thing. Like, he turns around, and he's got the cigar in his mouth, and he's got that great smile, and he goes, smiles at me, and he says, "Welcome." And I was just like, "Oh, this is going to be great." They've got Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
Now Hellboy, as we all know him from Hellboy, and of course Sons of Anarchy. Ron's a great actor, and prior to Magnificent Seven, he was on my favorite actor list.
Absolutely.
As well as Michael Biehn. Like, they were my 2 of my favorites. So I was kind of like a huge fan of their work. And still am. And then the other guys, I sort of knew them, but I just couldn't figure out where.
Yeah.
I think we were all, in our own way, outcasts and sort of rebels in a way. And I think that of the system, I think, of Hollywood. And I think that kind of made us all have this chemistry, man.
Yeah.
You know, like we all kind of do things.
That's pretty much the same with the show, though. As all of you
we're outcasts,
scattered outcasts. Yeah, that kind of came to you. So yeah, maybe that's why it kind of bled into what you guys did on screen.
Yeah.
So.
To this day, I haven't really worked, and I bet you Eric will probably say the same thing. And hopefully the other guys. I haven't really worked with a group of actors where I feel like I can just be myself.
Yeah.
You know, like you kind of have to put on a certain face when you go to work, and you know, with these guys, I was just like, did you just fart? I did too. You know, you know what I mean? Like it was like they were like my brothers.
Yeah.
I goofed around with these guys the same way I did like when I'm at home with my brother. And my dad.
Yeah, that really came through in the show.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's still really loved for that reason.
Yeah, totally.
It was amazing.
Yeah. I've done some pretty crazy stuff. I've done some pretty crazy things, I think, off camera. Just goofing around with the other actors, you know, like, okay, cut, we're gonna reset for the, you know, the lighting is off, you guys just chill out for 5 minutes, and then we've done some crazy stuff that no one knows about. But just clowning around and having fun. I haven't really done anything too crazy. I think Tony Stark's probably has done some crazy things.
I bet he has. You know, one of the favorite pictures that goes around the fandom is he's in his full Ezra wear, but he's got like his sunglasses on. And I don't know, like that picture is so popular. Everyone knows that one. It's just like Ezra with like his Ray-Bans or whatever. Yeah, it's awesome.
Ezra. I thought Tony played Ezra so beautifully and so perfectly, and he really worked.
There were like a lot of layers.
And he really worked really hard with all those different layers, and also the card tricks. Like Tony learned how to do all that stuff. You know, and I was really impressed by that. To me, that's when you know you have a real actor around, because they really wanted to try to do it and not have like a camera trick. They like to try to do it. They really. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna, you know, he would like always be practicing, and he would always be twirling his gun, and Andy was really great at gun tricks, as well as Mike.
I heard that Andy kept his guns actually.
Did he really?
That's what I heard. That he kept both of the revolvers.
You know what? Probably, knowing him, he probably did. I remember going over to his house one time, and he's a really cool guy to hang out with. We were out in his backyard. And he and his girlfriend had some barbecue, and we were watching the NBA Finals or something, and this pig just walks by. Like a big pig.
Random?
Yeah. You know, like, dude, like it's a dream or something. Like, I'm like, dude, is that a pig? Oh, yeah, dude, that's my pet pig, man. And that was so him. That was so perfect for his his character, you know. And I think he brought some of that into JD. You know, like JD is just kind of, I'll do anything.
Oh yeah.
You know, he can ride, he can shoot, he can fly too.
What would you have liked to have seen for Nathan's future?
That's a great question. I think probably more proficiency with his medical skills. He was really, I think, for a guy who you know had no formal education. I think Nathan was just a smart dude and could do stuff that no one else could do. He had, I think, almost an intuitive understanding of physiology and the body and how to heal. And of course, a lot of that came from his training in the Civil War, and you know, just life and death. You know, immediateness of having to save someone's life. I think he learned how to do it. I love the episode where he hooks up with a real doctor, or who we think is the real doctor, and then Nathan is actually the one who is the real doctor. You know, and not this other guy. You know, I had this idea that Nathan and Rain eventually got married, and they had family, and then they have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, and you know, like his kids end up going to college or something. You know, like they're the first in his family ever, you know, to go to have formal education. You know, and then years later, Nathan's like 98, and you know, he's on his deathbed, and you know, maybe his son or his grandson is the doctor. You know, and so I'm getting ready to cry.
Was there any one particular aspect of your character that you would have wished to explore further? I guess I kind of still the medical field thing, but maybe like a personality trait or something, or maybe his history.
Well, I wasn't really. I thought they did it. I thought that the writers did a really good job from the beginning, because they gave me a lot to work with. I didn't really like what I was doing. I liked what I was doing half the time, and then the other half the time I didn't like what I was doing. with Nathan. The first year was my first series regular role. I was making all this money, and for the first time, I didn't have to drive an old beat up, car, and I had a decent apartment, and so much was thrown at me that I think I had a little difficulty dealing with it at first, and also working with all these other actors who were so experienced, all of them, in terms of on-camera experience, were ahead of me in terms of the technical aspects of film acting, and I noticed that I had picked up quite a bit of weight, and I wasn't doing the best work that I knew I was capable of. So the second year, I got pretty much back in shape. I started really focusing on doing better work as an actor, and I liked what I was doing the second year a lot better than the first year. And I actually thought I was going to get fired after my first year. Yeah.
Oh, we all thought you were great. So.
Thank you. I mean, I was experimenting a lot with Nathan, and then I was like, I'm changing what I'm doing every week, and maybe everyone doesn't notice, but I know I'm doing something a little different. And I changed his voice from kind of a higher pitched voice to kind of a deeper voice, which is closer to my own. I had those little things that I was doing that I was like, what am I doing? And then I finally kind of settled into the character, and I look back on it now, and I was just watching, actually, before we met, I was actually watching Magnificent Seven maybe a month ago, and I watched not all of the episodes, but maybe some of the first year, and then maybe most of the second year, and I can say that I like what I did.
Yeah.
Well,
it actually kind of worked then, because you were evolving as an actor in the process, but at the same time, I guess it kind of came through because you guys were all evolving as characters.
Yeah.
So it worked that way too, anyway.
Absolutely,
so
yeah, it's true. It's when you're working with Kyle Reese, and Ron Perlman and people like Dale had brilliantly, to this day, no one can touch his Elvis Presley. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's scary. In fact, I think Dale once told me that. Right after I forget, it's called Elvis and Me, I think it was called.
I think so.
Yeah. Rick James saw him in a club one night. Rick James, and said, "Hey, man, Elvis Presley." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "You're Rick James," and they ended up becoming like friends. Like they were, and it's all because he thought his Elvis was just incredible. So he said, in fact, I remember Dale told me that Rick James told him that was the best Elvis Presley that he'd ever seen in his life. Someone sent me a shirt that had all the different cities where the conventions, like the posse would group together.
Yeah.
And I think one was in Australia, and another was in like New York and Detroit and DC and London, and the posse is alive. And I still have that shirt. In fact, I brought it with me to Seattle. I have the shirt. I should have wore it today.
You should have wore it, yeah.
But I still have the shirt. It's kind of faded out. It's the seven of us riding off in like the kind of a sunset, and you see our silhouettes. And it's a really, really cool design. And then I got sent some stuff from Ireland one time. Some little Irish little trinkets and stuff, and we love the Magnificent Seven, and it's amazing to me. I'm touched by it.
Yeah, very much still alive. Your fandom still out there.
I just recently got Twitter, so that's how we're here right now.
Right.
And I had no idea who Alex Cruz was until a couple of weeks ago. So, or to know that someone like yourself is out there who's writing about a show that happened years ago. And I had no idea that so many people still cared.
So many people, yeah. So I'm going to put this online, and everyone's going to be like, "We care."
Yeah, and I'm going to say this to Michael, Dale, Tony, Eric, JD, Andy, Ron, you guys, and Lori. You guys, there's still a lot of fans out there who care.